All right. Hello, hello, everyone. I see people are trickling in. Wonderful. So, my name is Allie. Oh, people are still coming. Bring it on. All right. So, hi, everybody. My name is Allie. Welcome to our little virtual event space. I will be the host MC tonight, which is why I've got my very official airline pilot gear on. If you are local, you might recognize me from the LFP location, and I am so excited to be introducing Mattilda Bernstein Sycamore and Madeline ffitch here to discuss two releases, The Freezer Door and Stay and Fight. So before we get into the fun stuff, I just want to really quickly thank you guys so much for being here, both of our speakers, and of course, all of you. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for tuning in and for buying books. Your guys' support really is what keeps us going, and we really love what we do. So if you also love what we do, please do come in, come see us. Come buy books, or if you're not local, you can totally order online. I will be throwing links in the description. We do ship. Shipping is $3.50 per book, and then like $1 after that for each subsequent book. And you get to support USPS, so it's like an added bonus. And again, I will be linking everything in the chat, so don't worry, it's easy to find. While you are over on the website, I definitely recommend checking out some of our other upcoming events or sign up for our newsletter. It's just one email a week. We're not going to spam you. And we're just going to tell you, who's here, who's coming, books that we have in stock, exciting new releases, blog posts, anything exciting that's happening in the bookstore. Also, you can always, of course, follow us on any of the major social media platforms. We are at Third Place Books. We even have a TikTok. We're so hip. And that's just going to be like the quickest updates, recommendations as we go into the new year. So we are going to be here for about an hour. We're going to be opening with a reading, which I am so excited for. And then immediately following that, we would love it if you guys would just pelt us with questions right at the beginning so we can roll right into it. There is a chat box, which I am seeing that people have already discovered. I love it. I love it. I love it. Please talk to us, share your thoughts and feelings. And if you do have questions, which we very much hope that you do, go ahead and throw those in the Q&A. It's a different box, but it'll just make it really easy for us to find your questions. So go ahead and get right on that. And without further ado, Mattilda Bernstein Sycamore is an American Library Association Stonewall honoree, Lambda Literary Award winner, and her novel Sketch to See was one of NPR's best books of 2018. Her newest book, The Freezer Door, quote, offers a complex meditation on the trauma and possibility of searching for connection in a world that relentlessly enforces bland norms of gender, sexual, and social conformity while claiming to celebrate diversity. Madeline ffitch co-founded the punk theater company Missoula Obligata and is part of the direct action collective Appalachia Resist. Her writing has appeared in numerous publications, including Tin House, Vice, and Electric Literature. Her novel Stay and Fight is a PEN Award finalist, Washington Book Award finalist, and Lambda Literary Award finalist, about a woman living off the land deep in the Appalachians who has found a family and fights daily to survive on her land. It is a tender, powerful, and absolutely hilarious book that I cannot recommend highly enough. Thank you both so much for being here. I am so excited to listen on this conversation. If you need anything, of course, this goes for all of you. I will be here but invisible, so give me a shout. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat too. And I think I'm just going to disappear. So I leave you all in their capable hands. Don't forget questions.
Hi, everybody. My name is Madeline. This is my first Zoom reading, and like all of you, I've done a lot of Zoom things since the beginning of the pandemic, but this is my first Zoom reading. So I'm really excited about the possibilities, like how I brought this lint roller. I could like clean some clothes for you. If you want to mandarin orange, just let me know. I have a whole bag of them. So in here, if you want a little spritzer, I got this the hippie water that makes you live forever. Just let me know. Got it all here for you. Okay, got some prop comedy out of the way. Somebody did on the chat something about a content warning, which is not something I usually do, but since people are concerned, I'm just going to let you know that I'm going to read a little bit of my it's a section of a new story, a new novel. You know what? Let's be honest. It's a section of a new novel that I'm working on. And there's stuff in it about drugs and being stranded and race and class and being a teenager and stuff like that. Okay, here I go. Thanks for having me. And thank you, Mattilda. I'm so excited about your book, The Freezer Door, so much. Okay. The world is not made for people who remember breastfeeding, which Woody did, and Leroy told him to go ahead and tell the two college girls in the front seat what it tasted like. Trees, pine needles, a roaring fire, strawberries, Necco wafers, the root beer kind, but that doesn't really touch it. There's no accurate comparison. The girls laughed, and the one in the passenger seat crushed up the pills Woody had sold her. Generously, she held some beneath the nostril of her friend who was driving, who was actually speeding, Leroy couldn't help but notice. How could you speed on downers? The world as it is currently designed doesn't work. Everyone else is okay with other flavors. Everyone is going through life satisfied or not remembering why they aren't satisfied. And this motherfucker Woody is thinking about mother's milk. It was Woody's party piece, but Leroy got him started or kept him going when they needed to either deflect or attract attention. Like the inevitable moment at these white college parties when people started paying too much attention to Leroy. Friendly or unfriendly, it was almost the same. White weird, like these two girls tonight. You're my new best friend and you have to come to this other party with us. It's your kind of thing. You'll love it. I need you. We can take this bitch's car. She's my best friend besides you. She's the designated driver. She's basically totally sober. Woody wanted to go because he had more pills to sell, and Leroy drained his beer and said, what the hell? And now they were actually in this dumb Subaru, and the faster this girl drove, the more menacing she seemed, and the older she looked, really fucking old, probably 21 or something, probably with STDs, definitely not aging well. She had always wished she was black, she confessed. So Leroy brought up mother's milk, and Woody took it from there. But where the hell were they? Leroy checked his phone. No signal. Pine needles, strawberries, a snow-capped mountain, the wind, coming home. Necco wafers, that was a new one. Gross, the girl who was driving said. That's like incest. I think it's cute, the passenger said. It's because he's an artist. He draws. What about you, the driver asked Leroy. Are you an artist too? Leroy's a vagabond, Woody said. Wow, so you practice the dark arts, the driver said. Only on a full moon, Leroy said, and Woody doesn't draw. So what does he do then, the passenger asked. Being an artist isn't something I do, Woody said. It's something I am. The passenger laughed so hard that she fell into her friend, who swerved into the wrong lane, which made the driver laugh too. Spit flying, drool, boogers, back into the right lane. Woody and Leroy did not laugh. They linked arms. Finally, the passenger tossed her head back against the seat and caught her breath. So you guys grew up in this hillbilly town and you're just gonna what? Die here pretending you're an artist and whatever that other thing is you said, a warlord? She said. A vagabond, Leroy said. I actually think townies are cute, though. They're innocent, the driver said. Where exactly are we, Leroy said. You said we were going to a party. I mean, fuck this. Don't be violent, the passenger said. You know what's violent, Woody said. What? The passenger said, picking her nose. Woody and Leroy pressed shoulder to shoulder in the dark back seat that smelled like girls' stuff covering up body stuff. Woody breathed it in, working up to what was violent. What was it? Leroy waited for Woody. Fuck you, college bitches, Woody said. Leroy's shoulder jumped, but Woody felt that he was onto something important if he could find the right words. The problem with you is that you don't even know, he said, even though you think you do, but you don't. He leaned his head against Leroy's shoulder, tired out. The passenger twisted around in her seat. She had dark blue eyes for which she received a lot of positive feedback. She had been to Montessori school, but that was a long time ago. If that's how you want it, fine, she said. She leaned into the back seat. Leroy and Woody shrank back, but she reached out with her thumb and pressed Woody's yellow cowlick to his temple as if she'd been waiting all evening to do it. I wasn't going to say anything because I can tell it's the one thing you have to offer, but fuck it, she said. I remember breastfeeding too. Oh shit, Leroy said. What now? No way, Woody said. Impossible. He struggled upright. He counted on his fingers, mouthing swift numbers. I mean, do the math. My mom nursed me until I was basically 5, which is statistically rare. You probably have at least 20 years of forgetting compared to my 11 years. 11, the passenger said. 11 years, Woody said. Of forgetting, Leroy said. Are you saying you're 16, she asked. The Subaru swerved again, this time to the shoulder. Brakes, hazards, Leroy noticed. Maybe she's a little sober after all. The driver turned to him. What about you, she asked. What about me, Leroy asked. Beside him, Woody began to hiccup. That hiccup. Since damp toddlerhood, it had been impossible to tell if he was laughing or crying, goddammit. How old are you? Are you underage too? Leroy said, I'm a statistically rare? Woody, what the fuck? You're a what? The driver asked. She pounded the steering wheel. What? I'm a minor, Leroy said, and then Woody's hiccuping was definitely laughing, and the two of them were losing all their air, sand castles crumbling, coursing rivers, boulder jumping, ricocheting pebbles against every window, what was or should have been meant by the word cavalcade, by the spectacle of dominoes, by the term peak oil, just so inescapably funny. I'm a teen, Leroy said. We're kids. We are the young, the youth of America. Woody laughed until he farted and begged Leroy to stop, but neither of them could stop. Everything was too true. Turn the car around and take the youth home, Leroy gasped, peeing a little. It's the only responsible thing to do. They were still laughing when the college girls, working together, pulled and then pushed the youth of America out of the car and left them there by the side of the road. Woody and Leroy had agreed to never talk about dull things or mediocre things or average things or anything that any adult would expect or want them to talk about. So it was hard, after they had finished laughing, to know what to say. They were on a long, curved 2-lane country road. Behind them, a grassy field dropping back into deep pasture, a wooden fence, a stand of tulip poplar. They could hear running water. No cars, no mile markers, no streetlights, no signs, no houses, no moon. They refused to say they were scared, confused, or cold. They refused to discuss the implications. Woody took out his phone. No signal out here, Leroy said. Living by our wits then, Woody said, looking around. Is that a cow? Asked Leroy. It was a cow. If there's a cow, there must be a barn, Woody said. Hillbilly, Leroy said. Vagabond. Townie. These were congratulations. Leroy pointed his phone's light into the field. Despite the cow, there could easily not have been a barn, but there was a barn. Leroy's light found it past the poplars way up off the road, a pole barn, the kind you see any old place around here, built last summer or 100 years ago. Because they had predicted this barn, Leroy and Woody felt more powerful and less afraid if they had cared to mention those things. They didn't, but neither did they lose hold of each other. They had been holding hands as a joke since they were 10, as soon as it became socially unacceptable to do so. They held hands now, and they made it past the cow, through the wet grass, to the large open side of the barn. Inside, empty stalls, bales of straw, a canvas tarp covering some kind of hulking machine, crates turned on their sides, old gas cans. It was not clear that this barn was the home of the cow. This is some Bethlehem shit, Woody said. This is some vagabond shit, Leroy said. Trust me. He started pulling apart a straw bale. He sneezed. After a moment, Woody helped. They lay down and Leroy pulled some straw over them. They pulled up their hoods and cinched them tight. You want to cuddle, Woody said. He did not say he was fucking freezing. Leroy laughed and they moved closer together in the straw. Didn't really feel that good to call her a bitch, though, Woody said. Yeah, Leroy said. When you said it, I was like, hell yeah. But then afterward, I was also like, wait, no. You know how sometimes it just feels like our moms are hearing us? Like they're listening to everything we're saying? Does that feeling ever wear off? But also, she was saying shit that totally sucked, Woody said. All that warlord townie shit. Definitely, man, Leroy said. Agreed. Even though technically warlords are dope, Woody said. But so are vagabonds, Leroy said. And whereas warlords are nerds, vagabonds are cool. Totally, Woody said. They lay there listening, the water running, the cow snorting as it passed by. Leroy remembered to turn off his phone to save the battery. Woody felt in his pocket the newspaper packet of pills he still had to sell. Not for the first time, he wondered how the pills would make him feel if he took them, either swallowed or snorted, which he knew was stupid to think about because, first of all, he would have to offer to share them with Leroy since he and Leroy shared everything. And what if Leroy said no? What then? Would he take them by himself? How would Leroy feel about that? Would that make things weird between them? Woody wasn't ready to think about that, so he didn't. Leroy burrowed against Woody's back. Is that really true? He asked, his breath a cloud over Woody's shoulder. What? Woody said. Breastfeeding, Leroy said. You remember it like you're always saying? Of course, bro. Of course I do, Woody said. What about you? Leroy shoved his arms up inside his hoodie, hugging himself. He drew his knees up to his chest. I remember other stuff, Leroy said. I remember lying in my crib and being like, fuck this crib, I want to get out of here. And fuck this diaper, I remember that. Fuck this diaper, Woody repeated. Yeah, Leroy said, fuck this diaper. With any luck, that'll be my first memory and my last memory too. They laughed until they fell asleep. Thank you. Thank you for clapping with lots of exclamation points. Okay, welcome, Mattilda. I'm so excited to hear your reading. I'm going to mute myself.
Oh, thank you for giving us that special preview. For everyone, I think this is the first time Madeline's read from that new manuscript. So we're the first ones to hear anything. Now, I don't see any questions yet. So just so everyone knows, you put your questions in the Q&A. Now, if there are questions there, Allie, then let us know because I see none. We are trying something a little different because there have been such great questions on my book tour, and usually I don't have time to read, to respond to even a few of them. So we are going to start at the beginning with questions. So if you have any, do ask us them. So I'm going to read from the middle of the freezer door. And yeah, we'll go from there. The dream of urban living has always meant a density of experience, that random moment on the street that changes you. But now, when people say increasing the density, they mean building more luxury housing for new arrivals who only want a walled off urban lifestyle with a suburban mentality. Keep away difference. Avoid unplanned interaction. Don't talk to anyone on the street because this might be dangerous. People talk about increasing this density as if it's a necessity for the future viability of Seattle. But viability for whom? If our cities are only destinations for the wealthy or soon to be wealthy, what is the point? How did this city become the environment of locked in space instead of the place where all the locks are broken? I'm on my way to Pony, and some fag wearing a backwards floral baseball cap tries to give me the straight gay attitude for stretching on her building. Let me be clear here. I'm stretching on the railing for the unnecessary stairwell leading down to the entryway of a building called Onyx. There's nothing Onyx. The building is gray, tan, and beige. It's like Florida meets the supermarket. But they do have that railing, which is useful for stretching my legs, especially since my usual place, the jungle gym at Cal Anderson, was filled with kids playing. But I'm trying to tell you about dancing. Yes, dancing. The point is all this jumping up and down. That's Thomas's style, but also it's because he's a lot taller than me, which is unusual. And I want to get up to his eyes. There's so much joy and moving in and out of someone else's moving in and out. We're so close we could be touching. I mean, we are touching, but it's only our breath. I didn't know I could have this much energy, sweat pouring down my face, and I keep saying I'm gonna stop because I don't want to get too tired, but then I keep going. Maybe the next day, walking to the park again. I mean, it's night and I'm too tired to cruise, but then I'm cruising and why? But then I hear something that sounds like a fiddle, so I walk in that direction. It turns out the fiddler is packing up, but now someone's playing piano since there's one right here for pianos in the park. And watching the way the piano player moves is way more fun than watching the way the people cruising will never move me. Eventually, it's just us. He's playing for me and I'm dancing. Yes, dancing. It's not like pony, but still it's dancing. And then he's singing too, straight love songs or straight not quite love songs. And I'm almost in love with him, especially when he stops and says, I love that you're dancing. Nothing about him leads me to believe he's not straight, except maybe the moment when he says, why are you here? But I'm not sure I want to leave this moment to go to a moment that probably won't become a moment. So I stay. When I moved back to Seattle, I wrote about my blue overcoat hanging on the knot of a tree in the park while I was getting fucked. Cobalt blue, the color I saw for years on women's coats, and then finally I got my own. Found it at Goodwill in San Francisco, and I wasn't even looking for a coat. That's the best way. Actually, I found it on the same day I found two others, all of them wool. The big puffy shoulder magenta 80s one. And what was the other one? Oh, the long red coat that flares at the bottom like the sound of music. The blue coat is the warmest, maybe even the warmest of all my coats. No, there's a large plaid one, but that's a men's coat, so I don't like the cut as much, except it's better for fitting more layers underneath. I got that coat when I lived in New York, and I'm pretty sure I didn't wear it once during the entire decade I lived in San Francisco afterwards. But good thing I saved it because it was definitely useful when it got really cold in Santa Fe. No matter how many times you tell people that Santa Fe is a four-season town, everyone still thinks it's always hot and dry. But sometimes in the winter, the high would be 8 degrees. And that's about 40 degrees colder than the coldest day in San Francisco. So I wore that plaid coat a lot. It turns out I need that coat in Seattle too. Even though the last time I lived here, the warmest coat I had wasn't even that warm, but I guess I wore 2 sweaters underneath. When I moved back, I wrote about the rain, yes, the rain, and how sometimes it's noon and you still feel like the sun hasn't come up. Will it ever come up? Will it? But at night, walking in the rain, and oh, the air is so fresh. Walking in the rain and there's no one or everyone. And the trees, yes, the trees, and how they get so tall everywhere. Something that would just be a little shrub somewhere else, towering to the sky between buildings. It's raining today, but the sun will come back up. It will come back up because it's August. And I need at least 2 more months of sun, right? And those nights of wearing nothing but a tank top and shorts. And now you know I'm in the park again. I could tell you about the guy who says he's safe because he was married for 20 years and now his wife is going back to Mexico. But I say, no, let's use a condom. And then he wants to take me to his mobile home on Queen Anne. Are there really mobile homes on Queen Anne? So he's fucking me under the main cruising tree. And I'm thinking about how this lack of pain still feels like a dream I barely imagined. And then I feel someone else's hands on my head, his knees right up against me. So I'm grabbing the back of his legs as he's getting harder. And I think I'm probably gonna regret it when I look up to see his face. But then I do, and it's porn when porn finally means something. Walking back, there are people trying to get out of the tower. They got locked in. And one of them climbed the gate to get out, but the others are still stuck. Their friend went to call the fire department. I yell, "Do you need anything?" I don't know how to pick locks, and I don't have bolt cutters, but they say thank you anyway, ask me my name, and then I realize I'm yelling right next to everyone else cruising like no one's stuck in any other way. Some guy comes over to me and he's really tweaking. I say, "Sorry, I just got fucked in the dirt." Then I'm walking down the hill and I think, finally, I'm ready to be a slut again. Maybe that sounds strange because I've been a slut the whole time, but I'm ready to be a slut and feel it. When people say something like, "Oh, the youth," or "Oh, the elders," I really just want to laugh because it's not like anybody's doing a good job of anything. I pass a neighbor on the street and he turns abruptly to look at a cement wall. I'm always confused by anyone who says they're not depressed. But when someone says they've never been depressed, this is frightening. Apparently, this shrub is known as America's living fence. Also, there's a dead fence behind it. But I love it when a bush grows big enough to cover a no trespassing sign. Thank you. So Madeline, feel free to come back into the room. I'm gonna do a little dance to like stretch out my body. If anyone needs to stretch, this is your moment. You can stretch anytime. Say that again. You're just saying stretch. Yes, stretch. Yeah. Like a little, oh, I see we have questions. So things are heating up. Now, if anyone else has questions, throw them down. Oh, thank you for these beautiful comments. Yeah, we love the chat. We like it to feel like it. It's so funny. When I started doing these readings, like I would never, before this pandemic, I would never, ever, ever have done like a virtual reading, or virtual anything. And I would sometimes get invited, like, university, they're like, "Do you want to Skype in?" And I'm like, "No." But now, like I really feel the intimacy of it, and so, and some of that is the chat, right? Because it's like, you're like, oh, there are people here, right? It's like, woo, things are good.
Yeah.
And Madeline and I, we're like both not in Seattle. We were here at Third Place Books 2 years ago. There might be people here with us then. It was pouring rain. It was, right when Stay and Fight, or on the beginning of Stay and Fight tour. And we had an amazing crowd, and we have an amazing crowd tonight. So thanks for joining us and keeping it intimate and delicious, right? Did you look at these questions? Should we look?
What is the difference between, the Q&A is different from the chat. Okay.
So it's like at the bottom.
Yeah, I felt like it was weird to not be able to see and hear all of you, but then it's kind of the give and take is that seeing the chat is really cool. You can do that in an in-person reading. Like we're starting the reading and like an old friend is like, "Hey, I'm here, really great." Like, it's cool. It's kind of interesting. It's cool.
Well, I love these questions. They're actually related. Let's take a look for a second.
Let me look. Let me see.
Yeah, I'll read. Should I read it? I'll read. Let me see if. Yeah, let's take them separately, even though they're very related. Let me take a look here. Yeah, no, this is good. Let's start with the first one. What do you think? Should I read it? I'll read it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So both of your work is so rooted in place. Can you share a bit about how places drive up? About how place drives your work? Maybe how place inspires you to write, or the responsibility you feel to it. Okay, that's several layers.
Yeah.
Do you want to start, Madeline?
The responsibility that we feel to it. Yeah, those are related questions. For me, so I grew up in Northeast Portland, and then the place that I've called home for the longest, by far the longest as an adult for the last 11 years of my life is Appalachian, Ohio, right on the Millfield, Ohio. You're from the question askers, a Millfield person. Yeah, which is our, so that our friends call it Northern West Virginia, and this is Appalachia. And I think that, interestingly, both Portland Oregon and Appalachia are places that I've lived through the experiences of them being places that people kind of act like are not even on the map and no one's interested. Like when I was growing up in Portland in the 80s and 90s, I would sometimes tell people I was from Seattle because I would worry that they hadn't even heard of Portland. Okay, flash forward to now where everyone feels like this special, you know, whatever. Both of those regions are very highly like branded places. And so I think for me as like a transplant to, maybe I'll just kind of focus on Appalachia for a second. I'm a transplant to Appalachia and I want to write in a really honest way about that type of experience and the interrelatedness, like the connections that people have. One of the stories that's told about Appalachia is that it's this kind of like, well, you know, white nationalists are trying to make Appalachia a white ethno state, just like white nationalists wanted to make the Northwest a white ethno state. There was like moving the white ethno state goal to different regions. And part of that in Appalachia is to make it seem like no one ever leaves and no one ever comes in. It's like this pure place of, it's kind of this kind of mythology that is about like purity and separation and separateness. And I think people who would consider themselves to be like highly against that type of white nationalist project still end up playing into that by acting like there's this authenticity fetishization in Appalachia that tends to like really be about static, fixed identity, whiteness, and stuff that I don't see as real living in Appalachia, and a lot of Appalachian writers and Afro-Latin writers are writing against. And so for me, part of the responsibility I have felt pushed towards identifying in a very specific way as an Appalachian writer, or writing about place, like having some kind of like key angle on authenticity in Appalachia. And I guess for me, it's very important as a writer and the responsibility I feel to this place that's my home, that I feel like I belong to, that I feel a sense of belonging to really reflect that in a very complex way as a transplant to the place, and to reflect that people come and go and it's not a monolithic place. It's not a fixed place. There's no fixed authentic identity thing going on in that place. And that writing about the variety of Appalachia, of what it can mean to live in Appalachia, is an important part of that project. And I think that no matter where you're from right now, sometimes writers are pushed to identify with a place in a way that kind of reflects like capitalist brand idea, you know, branding ideas. Like, I'm this person and I'm writing about this in this way because I can represent it in a very fixed and specific and authentic way. And I guess I just feel like in order to keep our imaginations vivid and free and wild, we need to make sure that we're being responsible to the multiplicities of what identities can mean and what it can mean to be belonging to or having a responsibility to a place. I think that's where I would leave it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love it.
What do you think?
What did you say? Keep our imaginations wild and free. Was that?
Yeah, wild and free. Like we don't have to reflect this idea of like what authenticity means, and it tends to reflect a lot of power dynamics that I don't want to be replicating, and that don't really reflect the reality of what it means to live somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would say all of my books are very firmly rooted in place. So the freezer door it's very much about Seattle, and I like to say that gentrification is the landscape in which the book takes place, right? Mm-hmm. And so everything that's happening in the freezer door is happening in that landscape, mm-hmm. and that is this overarching limitation or box or confine that everything is stuck in a way. And so for me, I want to write about, I guess, the ways in which that gentrified mentality. So first of all, of course, we have like what people think of as gentrification, property speculation, displacement, removal of, the wrong kind of people and bringing in the right kind of people, and the smothering of any kind of compassion or intimacy or possibility. But also I think gentrification of bodies, gentrification of desire, gentrification of lives. And so when I'm writing about place, but I also want to write about, so in the book, I would say the freezer door is about searching for kind of like what I say in the excerpt I just read, or in a different excerpt, sort of the dream of the city as the place where you can find everything and everyone that you never imagined, right? So it's not what you imagine only, which is good, that's a good starting place, but it's what you never imagined. And gentrification sort of denies or removes or destroys those possibilities. But also, like the book, you know, like I want to be very, I guess, almost granular about the place. So like I'm talking about the trees, I'm talking about breathing, I'm talking about the air, I'm talking about the horrible outfits of the yoga boutique, I'm talking about how people refuse to engage with you on the street, I'm talking about trying to connect anyway, I'm talking about dancing, I'm talking about these particular bars, I'm talking about a building called Onyx, I'm talking about, you know, and it's all there, it's all on a level playing field. And part of that for me is trying to create that potential for what I want in the world, which is those sudden intimacies to happen anyway, you know? And so I guess I would, so that's something about place. And I think actually Paul Constant wrote once, I think, it wasn't in the most recent review, but it was a past review about Sketch to See. Now, Sketch to See takes place in Boston. It's very much about Boston in 1995 and this city that's like rabidly afraid of difference. And so I guess in a way, and then, you know, the end of San Francisco, of course, a lot of it is set in San Francisco as the place that formed me, and the dream of a home for the fringe and the failure of that dream. So in a lot of ways, I think I'm writing, I would say almost all my writing is very urban and, you know, based in particular cities. And it is about the failure of those dreams in different ways. You know, each book has a very different, like Sketch to See has a totally different like tonality and texture and narrative and feeling, but each one is very specific. And I think also I am very, like right now I'm writing a book about my relationship with my late grandmother, who was a visual artist from Baltimore. And so there's a lot about Baltimore, you know, which is a whole other thing going on. And, you know, in writing the book, part of it, I moved to Baltimore temporarily so that I could get whatever came through in that environment. So I guess I would say, yes, I for better or worse, I think for better, my writing is always very formed by where I am or where I'm imagining. And about trying to, like, I guess in a way what you were saying, Madeline, like to take it in a different direction, to try to find the freedom that is possible anyway, in spite of the limitations. So maybe, I know there was a second question about place. Let's take a look at that one.
Yeah, I think that one about like, has it felt hard to write?
So it's like, are there any places that matter to you that you've tried to write about, but couldn't or can't yet? That's such a great question, Sarah.
To me, this is interesting for me in terms of Mattilda's work, because I'm a person who grew up in the Pacific Northwest and feels very strong sense of home in Portland and Seattle. And I do have and one thing I really appreciate, like in The Freezer Door, I just love reading about Seattle, and I just love reading about I love reading about the individual trees and the rhododendrons, and I love the pairing of public sex with unruly flora, you know, with the unruly plant life. Like, I think this is intense anti-gentrification and like deep alertness to the land, to be like, this tree, like I just go through the book and I'm like, okay, there's this unruly, untamed public sex happening, and there's the noticing of the exact tree, like this exact tree and the way it's shaped and how it exists, you know, and this rhododendron bush and the way this dirt is, you know. It's like, to me, that's really beautiful. And I'm really appreciative of it, especially because I do feel like those places are really important to me, and it is a struggle to write about them. And partly it's because of gentrification. I think that for those of us who have long histories in those cities, now everybody thinks they know what those cities mean and what those cities, what it's like to live in those cities. And I want to really uplift the truth of that, and at the same time reflect that, like, my family on my mom's side goes back 4 generations in Seattle, which, you know, for settlers a long time. And we don't think of Seattle as this like super rich, highly stratified, wealth stratified town where like there's the super wealthy and the really, and anyway, I've been trying to write, and then like, houseless people living on this, the same block and getting the cops called them all the time by condo dwellers. Like, that's not the Seattle that I was raised in and that I was even a teenager in. And the same thing with Portland. Like, we say middle class now, kind of sometimes it's like a pejorative, like, oh, middle class values. But also at the same time, I'm like, Portland and Seattle were like deeply middle class cities when I was a kid, like just kind of pretty affordable and actually a little bit shitty, and like kind of like, I don't know. And that's not how I see it now. And so I don't know how to reflect necessarily in writing, like to be honest to the experiences of the ways those cities have changed. And actually to me, this does have to do with race too. Like even this summer, people commenting so much on whiteness in Seattle, whiteness in Portland, how white those cities are. So, I grew up, I know that's true, but I also know the radical histories of those cities. I know like the Black Panther Party chapters in those cities, like the kids I grew up going to school with, and the strong history of Black resistance and Black owned businesses in Portland. So I want to be real about the whiteness and the whiteness problem and the white supremacy without erasing all of the multiplicities of people who've lived and worked in Seattle and Portland. That is something that's been really hard for me to do, being so close to that material. And it's something I've really appreciated about your work, Mattilda, is just seeing the Pacific Northwest reflected in that, in kind of like all of its possibility, and then all of like the heartbreak of the way that it's what is happening now for people, how unlivable it's becoming for people.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I love what you said about, writing about the trees and the landscape and the bushes. Because the thing that one thing that surprised me in writing the book, like I didn't like intend that necessarily. It's just that is like, people are like, why are you in Seattle sometimes? And I'm like, that's what keeps me here. Like, because when everyone's let me down, the trees are still there, and that's when I feel the most of a sense of place. And I love what you said about about middle classness, because I think the first time, like when I came to Seattle, I lived here for a month in 1994. And I was like, this is the most middle class place I've ever been in my life. And I meant it in that totally dismissive, like, this is like, what is this? And I'm like, people like, there's like a counterculture mall on Broadway, you get your hair dyed in like a mall, and you get your tattoos done. And I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
And then what I learned, I lived here in 96, 97 also. And then I've been here since 2011. Wait, what? No, 2012. Oh my God, 9 years. But I think the thing that I've noticed the most is that the kind of middle class you're talking about, which is where people can afford to live where they are, and have like a good standard of living, and not always be pushed, aside. That's the thing that's gone in Seattle and Portland for the most part. And even the other thing that was fascinating to me when I lived here 96, 97, so I was like, in my early 20s, and I had friends who their parents would be around, and I was like, what? I was like, wait, you didn't try to escape that? And they were still in their lives. And that's a very middle class thing too, but it was like middle class in like a supportive, not like a strangle, I have to escape abusive way. So those are great points. And to Sarah's question about a place that I want to write about but I haven't been able to yet. Well, I guess I've written a bit about Santa Fe, but I did, because I lived there like just a little over a year. I wrote a piece about Occupy Santa Fe because that's where I was when the Occupy movement started. But I also had like a book that I was working on, and it was kind of like Santa Fe, people call it the city different, but it's like a place where you feel colonialism, like in everyday experience, in every single interaction. And it plays out like, and I had never experienced it like that, where it's like, people talk about like tricultural harmony. And what they mean in Santa Fe, they call it Anglo, Hispano, and what would be the word they use in Santa Fe? Not native, because native means a descendant of the conquistadors. So they would say Anglo, Hispano, and Indian. But what it means, there's no tricultural harmony. It's just colonialism as it plays out. Like there are monuments to the conquistadors that were built in like 1992, in the center of town, And so I don't know, maybe that's a place that because I had something and I looked at it and I was like, this is garbage, no thanks. And the other place, I have written about DC and growing up, but that was probably the hardest place, to write about. And it's only, it only came about, say, with the end of San Francisco. But maybe that's something that I might explore at another time. And I definitely want to write about Seattle, like this whole year. That's gonna be happening. But I don't know. Again, that I think it's gonna. I'm not sure, but I think it's a novel. But in the context of the pandemic, mass protests, and all of the possibilities and horrors. So it may be a novel, and I may have someone who's, I don't know, it's in my head, but we'll see. I won't tell you too much more about it because I don't know if it's really gonna happen. But yeah, let's see. I think we saw some other questions. Well, one of them, we have to answer. Why are you both so amazing?
Why are we so amazing? I was like, I should answer that for you and you should answer that. But I think maybe we should just let it.
Yeah, we'll just let that one in.
We'll just let it.
So how do your work grapple with, reject, and or seek a relationship with home? I love that all of these are about place.
Yeah.
So do we feel like we should take that one separately, or I'm curious to know why you live. Oh, this is interesting too. Someone also wants to know why we live where we do. So let's take those two together, and then we'll take the next one separately, do you think?
About the friendship?
Yeah, so let's
both
say
of those sort of home ones together. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, let's do that. And we have kind of answered them, but maybe we could just sort of approach in a short way. Well, I'll start. Yeah, my work definitely. I am always searching for home in my life, and I've only found it. I found it twice, and that both of those times were in San Francisco. You may notice I now live in Seattle. And that was because everything I believed in let me down. And I couldn't live somewhere anymore where all I felt was lost. But I don't yet feel like Seattle is home. And home for me is when I can go outside and be in a public space and see people who I don't know, but who I feel like they recognize me as one of them. And that doesn't happen in Seattle almost ever. And it happened all the time in San Francisco. So I'm still always searching for that. And the role of friendship, I think that's a perfect connection, because friendship for me is home. It is how I create home. And I think in my life, there are probably three things that have been the most important. One of them is activism. One of them is friendship, relationships. I just say relationships, and by that I mean friendship. And the other is writing. And at different times in my life, one of them has been more central than the other. And activism was very central to me when I first moved to San Francisco when I was 19 in the early 90s, as well as friendship. And over the years, both of those have let me down way more than my writing. And writing is where I feel the biggest sense of home. And it is also how I find myself, by writing into all of my vulnerability and longing and loss and desperation and devastation and maybe also connection or hope for that. It's also how I find connection with other people. But the thing that I do feel is like weighing down on me, like so much, is how people throw away friendship. They just are like, well, that's garbage. I don't need that anymore, in favor of this, this other thing, which is like relationships, romantic, partnerships or whatever. So I'll just leave it at that because I know we're getting close to time. But yeah, but I like that connection that I wouldn't have thought of it quite that way. Am I dark to other people or do I look fine?
To me, you look great.
Okay, it's good. Yeah, it says my battery's low, but I don't know what that means. So tell us your answer about home and about friendship.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what you're talking about, Mattilda, with to me, friendship is, it's connected to home because when, like, talking about, for example, when I was talking about being like a transplant to Appalachia, to me, I'm like, well, why do I feel like writing about where I live? Well, that's where I have relationships. And I don't have relationships with people that think that I was born and raised and I'm like 6 generations Appalachian. I have relationships with people who know exactly where I'm coming from and who I am. I try to be real with them. I try to they have hope that they can be real with me. Those relationships are dynamic. And if you have a place that is home to you, you should be able to invite those dynamic types of relationships in, like where there's this kind of reciprocal honesty and people can be real about where they're coming from. And to me, the biggest experience, like learning experience, for me, in terms of home and friendship and the way those things go together is, I guess I think of home as a place where, and something that I think is why I consider where I live now to be home. It's where I can really sort of like trust and cohabitate and know people in a way that doesn't at all necessarily mean that we like each other or that we're like pals, you know what I mean? But we're like in the community, we're in community together. And that's, I'm a sucker for people who like just delight me and who just are funny and charming and like just nonstop great to be around. And it's been really good for my writing and also just for me as a person to sort of expand my sense of community to include really difficult people, really, just people who are worthwhile for all kinds of reasons. Like I trust them, they have my back, they will fight back against the police, they are good at using tools, they're generous with their time, they help take care of my kids, like those kinds of things. And those sometimes matter more to me than just like the repartee that we have. And that's been really good for me. That's like a huge part of being in a place that I consider to be home. And that kind of relationship building goes directly into my writing. And then I also think I'm really glad that you brought up sort of the heartbreak of being abandoned by of having friendship being demoted in favor of like a primary relationship, like marriage or something, like, I don't know, marriage for an example. But I think that's one way that I think the community that I prize the most kind of like pushes back against, I guess for lack of a better word, like normative or heteronormative, community is being extremely serious about the relationships that we have that are not like just two people alone, with their children, even in a pandemic.
But that's the ideal, don't you think?
No, I think, it's funny. Speaking as somebody who often lives alone with one man and 2 children, the American dream. I think that the times that those things are the hardest is when we're alone and when we're not prioritizing our lifelong relationships with other people that we're connected to and that we're close to. And to me, it's very interesting how bizarrely rebellious it feels to prioritize friendship in that way. Like, why is that such a radical thing to do, right? And like, why do we train ourselves out of it? And then, so inviting people. And the other thing is, I think it's traditional to do that. Like, I think it feels like rebellious and countercultural or something, but actually it's really traditional. I come from a family where like there's always room for somebody else at the table. Like there's people who are like still around that were like divorced. I know some of my family's like in the audience right now, but you know what I mean? Like they're still coming around, we're still, so like, why can't we just admit that narrative is huge? And that's a lot of what I write about. And in the new novel that I'm writing, I think in Stay and Fight, I was just trying to barely get by with the characters that I could get by with because I'd never written a novel before. So I was like, I think I can do 5 people, but I don't think I can do anything else. Let's see if I can do this. But my actual life is just like a totally open house, people coming and going, landmates, roommate, housemates, like friends, relatives, cousins, siblings, parents, elders, babies. And I want to know if all that can fit in one book. And it's something I'm trying to reflect. I think most of our lives really reflect this kind of on and on and on relationship stuff. And that's huge. And that's actually why a sense of place becomes home. It's because that place and those people and those relationships claim you. It's not because you're like, hey, I'm from Portland, like, cool, I'm from Appalachia. It's because like those are where the relationship, that's where people know you, and they say like, yeah, you're welcome here. We know you. We know that person. That person's a pain in the ass, but they're an asshole, but they're my asshole. You know, like that's how we claim each other.
Well, I'm definitely ready for that book with all those characters.
Okay, cool.
And I noticed I thought there was one other question, but maybe someone deleted it. So I think since we're at the end of the hour, maybe this is the perfect place to leave off. Of course, everyone should, buy their books from Third Place Books right now and support local bookstores, support Seattle. And
Uh-oh.
No.
I heard a sound and then silence. Well, let's give her a few more seconds.
I wonder if she really was low battery or something.
I was going to say maybe the phone. Well, I think we were kind of heading towards the end of the evening anyways. Shall we give her a few more seconds, or shall we just...
We could say it.
Let's just say goodnight, shall we? Yes. Here, let me throw the link up one more time. I'm seeing you in the comments. And thank you guys so much for being here. This was such a wonderful discussion. These questions were so good. Thank you all so much for not being shy. So this one here I'm linking right now is for the freezer door.
Mattilda, I'm still on the Zoom call.
There she is.
Do you want to say goodbye to everybody? They can hear you now.
I like to blow a kiss goodbye usually, but I don't know why it died. It's just like... Okay,
I'll blow a kiss for you. Everyone can hear you. You're on speakerphone. You're talking to the panel, to everybody.
Good night, Mattilda.
On your amazing book. Thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, Madeline. It was such a joyous conversation.
It was so great to see you. Oh my God, me too. Oh, that I'm an asshole, but I'm your asshole. Yes.
Yes.
What's up? I've been waiting to hear that.
Mattilda, I don't know if you can hear me, but the audience is sending tons of applause your way.
Okay, love you.
Thank you, everyone. All right. Good night. Good night. Thank you so much for being here. This was such a great conversation. I loved listening to it. Go buy books, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Good night.